What's up guys, it's Paraly5er here. Today we're going to be ranking all of the tier 1 armor sets in Grounded 1.4. Now this is going to be the final armor tier list that I'm ever going to do for this game, and we're going to do all of our final tier lists in the coming weeks. I've been waiting for an update to the game, but they don't seem to want to update the game, so if anything changes from when this video releases, because they probably are going to release a patch the day I release this video, then I will let you know, but I'm just kind of hoping and praying that they don't change anything, because it's been like a month since the last patch now, so they're taking their sweet, sweet time. Remind that we're ranking each armor set against the other armors in its tier, so we're not comparing Acorn armor to Broodmother armor. We're comparing Acorn armor to all the other tier 1 armors. It's not important how good they are when compared to the higher tiers, and it's kind of when you would use them in the game. So if you're using them in the early game, mid game, late game, that sort of stuff. The first piece we have is the Acorn armor. Now this is a heavy set of armor, which makes it really, really good for defense. It does, however, require berry chunks and algae now, which means you need to go to the pond and the hedge in order to craft this armor set. The peace effect is major threat, meaning that creatures are going to aggro you more often. It's a 20% increase per piece. And the sleek effect is max health, which boosts your max health by 10 per piece. But realistically, you should never be able to get sleek on this thing, because you should never upgrade this thing to level 6. You should ditch your tier 1 armor by the time it's like level 2, to be completely honest with you. The set bonus is uncrackable, which increases your stun gauge when blocking attacks by 15, which isn't a lot, but it is a small increase if you're running the full set. And what that means is the stun bar at the bottom right of your screen when you're blocking is 15 bigger. I think the default number is probably 100. And so for that reason, I'm putting the Acorn armor in S tier. It's no doubt in my mind that Acorn armor is the best tier 1 armor. It just gives you the most defense. That's why I love it the most. It's very, very good, especially on the high difficulties when you are trying to run a save. If you're on like WoW and you want to go and run through the game, then I recommend the Acorn armor massively. It's going to keep you alive. There's no other armor set that provides as much defense as it at the tier 1 level. It's the best tier 1 armor in my opinion. Next up, we have the Clover armor. This is a light set of armor, which means it has really low defense, but it does also have some effects with it. One of them is Tenderfoot defense, which increases damage resistance to tier 1 creatures by 5% per piece, so 15% for the full set. And the set bonus is Moist, which makes you lose water less frequently. The wiki's wrong on this one. It says trickle regen for some reason on the status effects page. But I'm going to place Clover armor in C tier. Very easy to craft, don't get me wrong, but it's a light armor, which means you take a lot of damage. The Tenderfoot defense is cool, but like, if I wanted more defense, I'd rock the Acorn armor. The set bonus is useless, it's just going to make you lose thirst less quickly. It is cheap to craft, that's about the only positive I can give you with this armor set. It's going to make you way too vulnerable in the early game, and I'm not a fan of it in the slightest. Next up we have Grub armor. Now this is a medium armor, which does indeed make it pretty decent for defense. It's not the best of the best, but it's pretty good. The peace effect is Tenderfoot offense, which increases your damage to tier 1 creatures by 5%, so 15% if you're wearing the full set. And then finally, the set bonus is optimized offense, which reduces the time it takes for stamina to regen by 10%. This is a very stamina heavy set, which is going to be really good if you're running the full set. You're going to not have to worry about stamina too much in the early game. It's a bit of a pain to craft though, I'm going to be honest. It takes a lot of grub hide and different meats and stuff, and it's just a bit annoying, but it is very, very good. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in A tier. It's really good for the high skilled players who don't take a lot of damage and want to output more damage and run around more quickly with the stamina regen. However, it is a pain to craft, like I said, because of the grub hide and the weevil meat that you need. It's just not ideal, so for that reason, I'm going to keep it in A tier. Next up, we have the Red Ant armor. Now, this is crafted from red ant parts, obviously, making it relatively easy to get in the early game of Grounded. It is a light armor, yet again, meaning it has really low defense, just like the Clover armor does, and it's slightly harder to get than the Clover armor. Each armor piece is going to increase your hauling strength by 3, which is going to take you from 5 to 14 in the early game of Grounded. And then finally, the set bonus is Humant, which makes it so that when you go to the red ant nest, and you go near any red soldier ants, essentially, they're not going to aggro you like they normally would. They see you as an ant. It definitely has to be higher than Clover, and I'd probably put it in B tier. I think it's very good for early game base building. And I also think it's very good for taking on that red ant nest early on, because you're not going to have to fight any of the ants. You can just run through and have it be nice and chill. So for that reason, I'm putting it in A tier. Next up, we have a very interesting armor set. We have the Red Strategist's armor. This is an interesting one. You get this one by killing the Red Ant Queen, and that's going to give you the parts you need to craft this, which means it does take a while to get to this point. The peace effect is summon aggro. It increases summon aggro, which makes it so that summons favor certain sources of aggression over others. I don't exactly know what summon aggro means. Like, what do they favor over other things? Like the thing that you're fighting, I guess? I don't really know. But the sleek effect is summon thorns, which reflects 25% of the damage your summons take onto the enemy hitting them. And then the set bonus is attacks have a 10% chance to spawn a friendly red soldier ant that dies after 12 seconds. This armor is a very interesting one. It's a medium armor set, so in terms of defense, it's not too bad. You are going to upgrade this down the sleek path, and in the early game, if you're using a summoner build, you're obviously not going to get to the sleek path because we talked about this with tier 1 armor already. It's okay. But in the late game, when you get to the multiple new game pluses and you turn it up to woe, this thing can kill any boss very quickly. Now, might this get nerfed? Yeah, it might. But as of recording this video, this armor set is S tier because it's actually better in the late game than the early game. Early game, it's really not that good. It's probably in B tier maybe. But in the late game, this thing is a joke. It will basically kill any boss you want to kill, as long as you have this with Mysterious Stranger, and the bosses kill your summons, and they take all that damage from Thorns. It's kind of one of the best armor sets in the game, so for that reason I put it in S tier. You could argue using it to kill bosses is cheese, but it is technically an intended feature, so they kind of made it really OP, so yeah, it's going to be an S tier for me, I think. Next up, we have ourselves the eye patch. The eye patch is a light piece of armor, and when worn, it will increase your attack by 10%, but reduce your damage resist by 25%, which is a big number. The sleek effect on it is minor threat, which makes it so enemies are less likely to target you. However, if you're making this, you're probably going to go bulky for a little bit of extra defense. This is another one of those items that I wouldn't really run in the early game. However, it can be useful in the very late game of Grounded if you're very good at parrying. You can run this and it will reduce your defense, but it will also boost the damage you deal. Thus, I'm going to rank the eye patch in B tier. It does have its uses. For example, I like using it against the Mantis because, to be honest, the Mantis is just going to obliterate you anyway in New Game Plus, especially once you pass like New Game Plus 5. So using this eye patch, you're still going to get one shot regardless, but you'll also be able to deal that 10% extra damage, which is very, very useful. So I think it's going to be a B tier item for me. Next up, we have the Gas Mask, which when worn makes you immune to gas damage. It does have a sleek effect of explosive resist. However, this is nowhere near as good as it used to be, as trinkets in New Game Plus all have explosive resist. So once you get to New Game Plus, you don't need to get the Gas Mask anymore because you can get Gas Guard or Explosive Resist on trinkets. However, prior to New Game Plus and early in the game, you're going to need this to get into the Haze. It is still a very useful utility item. Crafting recipe is a bit of a pain, but I'm going to say the Gas Mask is a solid B tier. You need it to get to the Haze, you need it to go through the Haze, you need it to take on stink bugs. Other than that, you're not really going to find yourself using the Gas Mask against any other enemies unless you're using gas arrows. So, for that reason, it's just going to be in a simple B tier. Next, we have the Gill Tube. Now, this obviously gives you Junior Diver when equipped, which makes it so that you have 40 seconds extra, I believe, underwater, taking your timer from 40 seconds regularly to 80 seconds with it equipped. The Gill Tube is a light piece of armor, and in terms of where I would put it in the rankings, I'm going to say that it's in B tier. Just like the Gas Mask, it has its utility underwater. Outside of being underwater, you should never use it as an armor piece. So for that reason, it stays in B. Next up, we have the Might Hat, which is a medium piece of armor and costs Might Fuzz and Grub Hide to craft. The piece effect for this is Hyper Stamina, which increases your stamina regen rate by 15%. Now, this piece of armor is alright for defense. However, it's a single piece, so you're not ever going to get a set bonus when using it. I personally would put this in C tier. I think if you want to run a stamina set, you run the Grub armor and you don't bother with the Might Hat. But if you desperately need stamina for some reason, then I guess you could run this armor piece in the early game It's also a bit of a pain to craft because I just don't like getting grub hide. I think it's pretty hard to find in the early game of Grounded. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in C tier. Next up, we have the aphids S. S tier. I use these things even in like New Game Plus 10. Okay? The aphid slippers are amazing. They make you run across the yard much, much faster with the quickness. The sleek effect, however, ImCade, not really that good. But it doesn't matter because they make up for it with how quick they make you run. I actually wouldn't even recommend running these too much in the early game, but definitely the later in the game you get, the more viable they are to run to get around the yard. 100% they are an S tier piece of armor, purely for their speed. Speaking of speed, we have the fin flops and the fin flops plus. Now, these increase your swim speed underwater. I'm going to put the regular fin flops in B tier. I don't find myself running them in the early game. However, towards the late game, I would recommend that you start to run these underwater to swim faster. Thus, I'm putting the fin flops plus in A tier. If you want to get around the pond quickly, you know, you're going to collect your mussel sprouts every 5 days, then just chuck these on along with your bubble helmet or gill tube, and you'll swim much, much faster down in the pond. I definitely recommend that you craft a pair of these to rock when you're swimming around the pond. Just be careful if you're in the early game, as you're going to have a really low defense when you only have a chest plate as your main source of armor. So it can impact you pretty heavy for taking damage, but they are very good for swimming faster. So that is the final tier 1 armor list. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your opinions and where you would have ranked these armors in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like on it, and I'll see you in the next Grounded video. Have a great rest of your day.